Okay, now that we understand that, let's create our flow. So I'm going to do an automated, and this is going to be my process responses to SharePoint with attachments, okay? And my trigger is when a new response is submitted. And now I'm going to create that trigger. Now I'm going to select my form, which is environmental audit. And 9.8 times out of 10, you also need to add get response details because the output of this is very limited. And I'll prove that to you right now. So I'm just going to do a little compose here. And this may be a little bit different than other connectors that you've worked with that give you like more information inside of the trigger. This one is limited, and I'm going to use a way to show you this. So I'm just going to run a test, which means that it's just going to trigger when the form response is done. So I'm going to go ahead and do a response. So I'm going to go to preview, and I'm going to do a response. Strange orders in front of tractor. I don't know, because it's air quality. And then I'll upload 2 files again. And I'm paying attention to the message underneath there so that I don't upload files that are too large, because I will get an error if I upload files that are too large. And now I'm also going to check send an email receipt where my response is. Now, this is a decision of the form designer, whether or not this shows up for them. And then it's the consumer's decision whether or not they want to opt into that. If they opt into that, then they will get an email receipt with a link back to this form as well, and the attachments, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and submit that, which will trigger my flow. And we're going to take a look at the JSON here so you can see what I mean. So if I go in here, you will notice that the outputs of this form being triggered returns this little bit of information right here. And so I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code. I'm going to do a file new here, and I'm going to paste this in here so you can see it. I'm actually going to turn it to JSON just to make sure you can see this clearly. The information it gives us as an output when a form is submitted are these few keys here. Notice that nothing on this screen screams, here's the answers they gave or the questions they were asked. There's nothing. What's key here that we will care about is this response ID, right? Which gets us back to the right form that was submitted. But all this other stuff is not going to help us with our process, all right? And so as we work on this together, you'll understand why things happen, because I'm going to try to explain to you what's going on so that you're not confused. And I'm just deleting these things that are open here because you don't need any of that, all right? So this, if I file save as this as JSON, just because I'm keeping a little record of it, right? I'm just going to call this output from trigger, right? And there's not a lot of outputs in this trigger, all right? Now, there are, on the other hand, a few inputs, and basically that's what you see right here, which is all encoded. Again, is not helping us with our process really, other than giving us an ID. So again, 9.8% of the time, 9.8 out of 10 times, you will need to follow this trigger with a very specific action, and that is get response details. Okay, so just get in the habit. As soon as you when a new response is submitted, just get your mouse ready and add get response details. All right, it's kind of like they go together like ham and cheese and eggs and bacon. Okay, and so we're going to select the same form that we did up here, and then if we click in response ID, this was that ID that we need. So this is the one value that we get back that we actually do need to pay attention to, because that response ID will help us get the details of that form. And details means a whole lot more than just, a bunch of webhook ID stuff that, most citizen developers aren't really concerned about. But hey, it is what it is, and we can still use it, all right? So I'm just going to save that change, and I'm going to do a test using the data from our previous run, right? Because we submitted a form already. I don't have to keep submitting forms. But this will let us see what we get back with get response details, all right? So this time, if we look at this, we get a set of outputs in the body. Let's look at the outputs in the body first, all right? File new, here's our outputs, all right? Now this looks a lot better because I see the answers they gave, or I gave. So I answered question 1 with zone 1, question 2 with air quality, question 3 or description with that. And so I can map this basically to my form. So let's go back to my form. Let's put it back in preview. Let's put this right next to it. Now, I know that this number is for construction zone. So Microsoft Forms API uses something that resembles a GUID to me. It's not quite a GUID, but it resembles a GUID, or it's a type of GUID, instead of the display name, which is the actual question. So I see this number, but that maps to construction zone. How do I know that? Because I see the answer, right? And I can tell that that means that, right? But notice that attachment field down there, which also has an interesting GUID that starts with R0. Keep that in mind as we continue. That one has a full array in it with the 2 files information that I added. Now, I want you to see that in the JSON here, but more importantly, I want you to see it here. So it's actually called out each of the questions in this run history so that you can actually see the JSON, which those of you that are interested can see that, but you can also see how that translates into human, right? That was this question, that was that one, that was that one. But notice the attachment looks the same. It's an array. It's an array. We need to break this array down so that we can get to the file name, the link to it, and find out what its ID is. In order to get the information about the attachments, we've got to break down this field, this property right here, okay? And this property right here is what's going to give us what we need to get content, all right? So let's hit edit. I hope that made sense. And I think as I continue, it will. All right. Now we have kind of what we need to create content from these attachments, right? So, and I'm just going to show you that in this compose here. I'm going to delete this and kind of show you that the get response details action has given us a lot of stuff. But especially that field, attach relevant features in our document, that one, we're going to have to break it down. And those of you that know about breaking down stuff, what do you think about? When you think about breaking down stuff, we think about Parse Data. So I'm going to delete this. We don't need it. It was just used to find those tags. Now we're going to Parse Data. Now, the right thing to do before I parse, is to go back to the run history and grab the output that we were just studying, all right? So in this case, I'm not really concerned about the body. It's got too much stuff in it. What I'm concerned about is these attachments. And this is an array. I can tell because it starts with a bracket, it ends with a bracket, all right? It has squigglies in it, right? So I'm going to Control A on this and Control C to make sure I've copied and pasted everything in that field. And now I'm going to hit edit and I'm going to add a parse JSON here. This will enable me to break that field down because right now it's just one big array. I want to break it down. So I'm going to do parse JSON. I'm going to choose that data operation. And then I'm going to pass into it that attach relevant pictures or document field, because this is the array I want to break down. Then I'm going to do generate from sample and paste the results of get response detail and that attachment field right in that payload. Okay, and you can see it starts with the name key, which is the name of the file. All right. Okay, so now we're going to say done. And now watch what happens with our compose. If I click in there, look at the parse JSON dynamic values. I get a whole bunch of detail. So now I can pull that link out, the name of the file out. I can pull the link to it in OneDrive out. I can even evaluate the size of it. You know, I can do a lot more than I could before because now we've broken down the attachments into properties we can use. All right, so now we're going to delete this and we're going to start to use this. We need content. So our goal is to be able to create a SharePoint list item, but also to add attachments. And in order to add attachments, we need to have content. So let me just show you that as we proceed. I want to create a file I want to create an item on SharePoint. So I'm going to go and look that up. So SharePoint create item. I'm going to choose the list where I already prepared. So SharePoint has already been prepared for this data. And so I'm going to pick that site and that list name, which will show me all the fields in that list. All right, so now all the columns are shown to me. I happen to have a default value for title in my SharePoint list, and Flow is smart enough to show me all the default values. I can choose to change it or I can just leave it. In this case, I'm fine with it. And so now I'm going to fill in the other things. Now these are drop downs, and I always can recognize drop downs because of the word value that follows the column name. So on SharePoint, if we look at these columns, they don't have the word value after them, but they do in Flow because Flow is looking at the drop-down list schema. So there's a choice list there. And if you drop this over here, you can see those choices. All right, these are the choices that are coming from the SharePoint schema. But I don't want to hard code this. I want it to be the choice they gave when they submitted the form. So I'm going to choose enter custom value, and I'm going to go all the way down to get response details in my dynamic content. And I'm going to choose the zone value. And then I'm going to do the same thing. This is another drop down in SharePoint for the area value. Again, these are both coming from my get response details because that's the only place where I've got answers, right? Okay. So then I'm going to add my description again. And one thing that I always forget to do is that you can search here. You can just type description up here. I always forget to do it, but it'll help you narrow down in case you have a lot of actions and you find yourself scrolling or getting confused. Go ahead and use the search whenever you know exactly what you're looking for, right? And I try to name my form fields something close to my SharePoint fields so that it's logical to me as I'm looking for the answers. All right, these other things are not going to get filled out because they're part of our process, so we don't need to mess with those. Now, there's nothing in here, though, that says add an attachment. Absolutely nothing. What SharePoint has done is given us a separate action for adding attachments. So if I look at SharePoint, and then I choose SharePoint and add attachment. Now I can add attachment. Now I'm going to run into a little problem, but I'm ready for it. So let me show you how this works. The add attachment needs the same site. So again, in every case, make sure that you're picking the same site and the same list. High priority, right? Create and add attachment, same site, same list. And then for the ID, you want the ID of the item you created. So we'll take that ID. Flow is helping us by only showing us an ID. And now the file name. Where do we get that from? This is not the file name of a file that exists already on SharePoint. This is the file name of the attachment. Okay, and any form can have more than one attachment. So I'm going to use my parse JSON to grab the file name. But remember, because there's possibly multiple, like that parse JSON is parsing multiple attachments, this is going to throw me into an apply to each. All right. So again, I'm looking for the name. So let's do a search. Let's try and be better at this. I want not the name from create item, but the name from my parse JSON, because create item, that name is about the item. I need the name of the attachment, right? So I'm going to pick that name, and notice it threw me directly into an apply to each, assuming that there's more than one attachment because the parse JSON is an array. Okay. So now I'm going to open up add attachment, and you'll notice that the name is in there. We already did the ID. Now we want the file content. So if we click there and we go back to our JSON, we're going to see another problem here. There is no file content there. It doesn't exist. We only have a link. So what can we do? There is something. Again, it's not evident, but let me show you. I'm going to add an action related to my OneDrive, because all of the attachments were put into OneDrive by the form. And I'm going to make sure I pick OneDrive for Business. And I'm sorry if you hear a little bit of creaking. It's because something's going on with the computer's, the keyboard stability. I'll try and fix it. I'm sorry. It's just been a problem. All right, so I'm going to choose the OneDrive for Business connector, and then I'm going to actually look through here, and you see that I have get file content. All right, so I'm going to click that, and it wants the unique identifier of the file. I'm going to click in here, and I'm going, well, I tapped it, I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry about that. So I'm going to click in here, and you'll notice that the we want the file content. We want to point to the file that the parse JSON is looking at. So if we scroll down and find parse JSON here, right? The file, the link to the file is here. But what it's asking for, you have to read sometime. Really important. It's asking for the unique identifier of the file. Okay, so I want to use the ID. This parse JSON section has the ID of all the attachments because we drilled into the attachments. And so it's important to pay attention that you're pulling the ID from the parse JSON. All right, so now what this does for us, and we don't have to change any of the advanced options, is it gets us the file content that this add attachment needs. So I'm going to drag this add attachment below the get file content. I'm going to open it up, and now from that action, we're going to see the file content, and there it is. And that's what SharePoint's waiting for, that file content. Okay? All right, so let's save this. Guess what? We're done. We're done for this video. And I'm going to go ahead and, from scratch, let's go ahead and fill out a new form. Let's add 3 fields, and let's see if SharePoint gets this added. And I'm just going to delete the ones we were playing around with so that we get a brand new one with really good data. And I'm going to go to my form. I've made sure that my flow is saved. So, and then I'm just going to go back to my forms, I think I clicked save. And so it's going to say saved up here. And then I'm going to click on my forms, say okay. And now the form is there. It's ready. Let's trigger it. So I'm going to run another one, zone 3. Let's do fences and barriers. And let's say a bear broke the west fence. Please create a repair ticket. Okay? So now I'm going to upload, maybe I have to upload pictures of the fences, right? So it could be the pictures. So anything works here. Pictures work here. Any type of file works here. So you can go in and find any picture that you want here. I'm just going to go ahead and continue to use my sample docs. So I will add an infographic and an invoice. Let's do that. Okay, so now we have 2 files adding to our form. Kind of feels real life. And then I'm going to also request an email receipt so you can see what that looks like. And I'm going to press submit. This is going to trigger the flow. Okay, so let's go back and see the flow running. I'm going to click on the words, which will take me into the runs where I can kind of jump into the one that's running. And look, it's all beautifully done. Okay, just to review, we've got the most important thing from the submission that we need in the output is the ID. We use that ID to get the response details. From those response details, we noticed that our documents were in the attach field. So we parsed that attachment field and we got out of it the name, the link, the ID, the size, and everything about each attachment, which was awesome because now we can do both, create the item, which comes from the answers up above, all of them coming from get file details, and then also do the apply to each for each attachment because we need to make sure that each attachment gets connected or attached to that create item. And you'll notice it has found 2. And so if I click on this, you can see that it did actively return a file ID from the get file content on OneDrive, and then it added that attachment successfully. Got a little green check mark over here. And this attachment here is the infographics file. And if I hit next up here in the apply for each, I can see that the second file was the sample invoice. So remember that you can hit previous and next to kind of drill through your different file, your apply to each. Okay. Now, if we go to SharePoint now and look to see what we get, you see that we got the new form response with our little glimmer that says it just happened. If we open that form response, there's our 2 attachments. If we click on them, they will open in the browser. So I hope this is helpful to the many people on the forums have been asking questions about this. I've seen this question like a couple of times in several places because people are starting to use attachments in forms and you want to take those attachments somewhere else. Now you've seen how you can break that down and get that information into Flow. I look forward to talking to you again very soon because there's another big question I'm going to post about. And I hope all of this is helpful to you. So I'll be talking to you soon. I hope you're enjoying the experience. We are working to simplify it as well in the back end. So don't think that we don't recognize that a lot of this stuff is not self-evident, but we are working on the back end to make it easier for you. And we appreciate your patience.